Welcome to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. I want to start out by giving everyone a happy new year. Thanks for joining us for the first episode of 2022. On this episode, we're joined by Eric, the director of coffee for Medici Roasting in Austin, Texas. This is a big coffee nerd out episode to start off the year, so I hope you guys enjoy it. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up. What's going on, Caffeinated Crew? I'm here with Eric Lepine. He's the head roaster for Medici Coffee in Austin, Texas. Eric, how are you doing today?
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on. I know it's a Saturday afternoon. We're getting a bit late into the coffee drinking window, I think, but I'm still chugging forth. I've got a fresh cup right here. What are you drinking on your side?
I'm on my third cup of the day. A little bit of a bittersweet moment for me. This coffee is a Pacamara from El Salvador. It's the first coffee that I bought when I came on to Medici, and it just kicked this week. So it's pretty much my last chance to experience this coffee until I already signed a contract for it for this coming year. So at least I have that to look forward to. Like I said, it's a Pacamara honey process. It's from a program that Caravella does to identify new young producers that are doing great things. So I'm happy to continue working with this producer. His name is Samuel Luna. Just like a super comforting, hot chocolate type of coffee. So we're probably, we're getting into prime time. I bought this coffee in the summer and it's the perfect time to drink it now.
Yeah. Is it a pretty seasonal grow where it's only produced in the summer or processed by the end of summer?
This particular coffee was a 12 bag lot, I believe. I bought 7 of those 12 bags. And hopefully get the opportunity to up the ante a little bit with the next one.
That's awesome. I'm loving a lot of these honey processed and anaerobic processed coffees coming out of El Salvador, Guatemala. It's a lot of awesome experimental, or I'll put quotes, experimental styles of processing and coffee coming out of that region.
Yeah, it's been interesting with the honey processes, especially coming out of Central America, to watch the progress of that. Wasn't really that long ago where it kind of seemed to me it was 50-50, whether you would get a sample of a very good one or a kind of middling or potentially bad. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of really good ones now. So it's really great that those producers are able to kind of diversify their offerings a little bit and never disparage anybody from making a little extra coin.
That's right. And never be afraid to branch out, try something weird and new. It's awesome.
For sure. On
my side, I found this random coffee at a shop that I was in the other day. It's called Goose Coffee. It is a Japanese style roasted coffee. So I'm imagining it's maybe turned by hand over a flame. I don't know what Japanese style roasting is. But it's a washed Columbian. It is a Caturra, Castillo, and I think that's the only 2 varietals that are listed. But yeah, and it's really good. I'm going to have to try to dive deep on the guy who's roasting this coffee because he hasn't, it's not even being really distributed. It's he's friends with a shop owner that just put it out for people to buy.
I kind of love that though. The idea that you can just get something and because you have no real clear idea of what it is, there's nothing to kind of give you a preconceived notion. You just kind of go into the experience.
There's literally not, I mean, he did put the altitude
and the varietals. But other than that, it's like no notes, like nothing. So like I was kind of going in blind. I'm like, I have no idea aside from the fact that it's a washed Colombian coffee. So I know I like washed Colombian coffees, and I know it's probably going to have, some almond, like nutty character, some probably cacao, like chocolatey, but maybe it's got some weird stone fruit, maybe not. I don't know, but it
probably
is
at least good.
Yeah. It's a super standard, washed Colombian coffee, like
cool,
extremely, just nutty. And
sometimes you just don't need to have your mind blown every time you take a sip.
It's pretty good though. I will say it does have like a kind of a citrus to it somewhere in there. But it's good. I like being impressed and surprised by random finds.
For sure. Yeah. I always think like, for me, I've worked in especially coffee for like 15 years now. And we do like a lot of nitpicking on that end of the market. And so like when we're always talking about, oh, this coffee is not very good, it's like grand scheme of things, that's a very good coffee.
Yeah.
So like I actually like to have a lot of bad coffee experiences to kind of like remind me what the actual spectrum is.
Exactly. When you talk more about, you mentioned your years in specialty coffee. What was your introduction to the specialty coffee industry?
I got into specialty coffee very much by accident. I had been working for Whole Foods for about 5 or 6 years in the produce department. And it was a very cool gig for me at that time because they were cool with me traveling pretty much as I wanted to. It wasn't too crazy, but my band was touring the US, I would say at least like 1 to 2 months out of the year. And this particular summer, I had done 6 weeks in the US with 2 weeks off, and then another 6 weeks as our first European tour. And I came back from that period of time, and the other kind of wrench in that was I had suddenly a new boss when I came back who didn't necessarily feel inclined to put me back on the schedule as a stranger, basically.
Yes.
So I had to like basically go to HR and kind of plead my case. Like, hey, look, I left under these pretenses and I came back and suddenly what I had agreed upon is no longer the case. But in the meantime, I had to like kind of pick up hours at another store across town, a much smaller store. They were looking for help in the specialty department. So I picked some shifts up there, and the team leader there mentioned that they were going to be hiring a coffee buyer. And I didn't really know anything about coffee at the time, other than I like drinking a cup of coffee. I thought, oh, it sounds like a potentially pretty cool gig. Expressed interest, got that job. And the store was like very small. If you think of like the idea of like what the average Whole Foods is today, like pretty big store. This was like maybe a third of the size of like an average Whole Foods. And so being the coffee buyer was kind of by necessity, like finding the time to manage that part of the specialty department while also being a vegan who was trying to sell cheese to people, just, lying to people about cheese for money. But I had a lot of good support from my team leader and store leadership to do the coffee stuff, kind of learn as I went. And at that time, Allegro, the coffee subsidiary that Whole Foods owns, had a program where every year they have their holiday blend, and they would take whoever sold the highest percentage of sales of that particular coffee, they would take on an origin trip. And so my store is super small. You couldn't walk an inch without seeing this coffee. And so I won, like 3 months into becoming a coffee buyer for this Whole Foods, I won this origin trip. Still don't really know anything about coffee. Find myself at Copa Dota in Costa Rica. It was like a big trip too, because it's like a person from each region of Whole Foods, and then the buyer for Allegro, and like a bunch of like executive levels from Allegro, and they were like filming training footage. It was like a lot of people, like two vans worth of people trying to like tour a coffee farm. And it was super cool. Like in retrospect, it like very eye-opening, but at the same time, a lot of it probably went over my head, being that my knowledge of coffee was 3 months selling retail bags of coffee at Whole Foods. But kind of like sparked something in me to learn more about it. And I went on to do the coffee buying for probably about 2.5 years between that store and a couple other stores. And I was still like somehow afforded the opportunity to basically tour with my band whenever while doing this like secretly super chill gig, just selling coffee, until eventually it came to a head again where Whole Foods was starting to get a little tired of that, and I had to end up leaving the coffee buying position, and I was working just like in grocery, just like facing shelves, like the most dreadful 8-hour shift you can imagine, just spinning cans on a shelf. I'm like, this is really just not my thing. And I was at a house show, and a friend of mine who lived at the house, his roommate worked for a local coffee roaster in town. And just on a whim, I was like, hey, you need to holler at your boy and tell him to get me a job at his job, because I am like dying working grocery. And I didn't even wait for that. I went on Craigslist and I saw that they were actually posted a part-time production position, applied for that, got it. And for a while I was working part-time there, order fulfillment, like packing orders, like packing bags go in boxes go to customers, whatever. And part-time also still in grocery at Whole Foods, which, you know, actually made working grocery shifts at Whole Foods seem even worse. Literally the minute I could get full-time hours at this spot, New Harvest that Justin had mentioned.
Yes, I was going to ask. Justin, he mentioned that you were there.
Yeah.
Or you mentioned that you were there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started at that company as just a full-time, eventually production person. And like pretty much a month or two into doing that, one of the roasters left, and I was asked if I wanted the opportunity to learn how to roast. And I was like, yes, of course. So that's kind of where I started learning my chops. Roasting side was at that business, moved on to eventually become the head roaster. And I was there for probably about 5 years. It was a very like cool, besides being like my kind of real introduction to like coffee production and roasting, I met like a lot of like pivotal people. That time at New Harvest was like this very interesting moment of like having a lot of like future like industry, like local industry people were all working there at the same time, and now they're all doing like different things for different companies, which is super cool. And then, like I said, I did that for 5 years, and then I moved on to George Howell Coffee for a year. And that was pretty amazing in terms of opportunities. Working for George was a very, again, another eye-opening experience, sort of like, you know, be similar to like, Yeah, I was an engineer at this like little local studio. And then, I did a year with Rick Rubin.
Yeah. It's like a
just
night
casually
and day experience.
That commute was like 70 miles one way for me. It was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
So I only lasted about a year there before I had to throw in the towel. And from there, I became the head roaster and green buyer for another company just outside of Boston called Fazenda Coffee. It was probably like the highest volume coffee roaster that I've worked for. So I learned a lot more about like efficiency and systems there. Mm-hmm. I was there for just about 5 years as well. And then the company that my girlfriend was working for at the time was like this new subsidiary of Alamo Drafthouse called Mondo, and they were going to launch a board game division. So that's kind of like the impetus of us moving to Austin. Was like probably 6 months pre-moving of just like reaching out to all my contacts of like, who do you know that is doing stuff in Austin? And then like with the pandemic, like 14 months of like trying to figure it out. And then I eventually landed this gig at Medici, which is pretty perfect. They have been a local cafe chain here in Austin for 15, 16 years now. But they just started a roasting program just before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So now we're in like this weird sort of year 2 of this thing that's still brand new.
Right.
But it's cool because I have the opportunity to kind of like build a portfolio like from scratch, which I've never had before. And that's kind of where I am right now.
That's really awesome. I love that your introduction to specialty coffee was as a buyer, as opposed to coming in as a barista, which is, I would say, probably 95, if not more, of the specialty coffee industry.
It's very funny to meet new people who always just assume that was my pathway. And like, we'll have like this like sort of awkward moment where like people just assume like I know certain things about like espresso maintenance, for instance. And I'm just like, nope. I mean, I could do it in a pinch, but like, I'm not your ideal candidate by any means.
Right. You had mentioned about starting your work at Medici in Austin. Now that you've relocated there, what sparked your interest in working with them?
This is like another one that 100% fell into my lap at the perfect moment. The person that was doing my job prior to me decided that they wanted to move to Nashville.
Okay. And
I had reached out basically the week that they intended to give their notice. So it turned into like, I kind of need to give my notice because this guy is like the perfect transition to just have this be a seamless transition. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just worked for me because I kind of just know what I'm getting into and how to get to where they want to get to. So absolute happenstance.
That's beautiful. I love it's almost like it's fate. It just beautifully rests in your lap and you just walk right in. That's awesome. You guys roasted coffee for the U.S. men's national team, the soccer team.
We did. And that is also something that 100% just fell into our laps. We had been talking to Q2, the stadium where the new MLS team plays. Mm-hmm. We've been talking to them for a while, and they just kind of, that opportunity came up where the U.S. men's national team was going to have a qualifier there, and they hit us up about providing service for the staff and team. And yeah, it was cool for me because I'm a huge soccer fan. I didn't get to really do anything other than claim all the responsibility for them winning that game.
Off of the caffeine energy
I'm just saying they won the Austin game, and then as soon as they stopped drinking my coffee, they went and lost the game.
It's true. That's what was holding them on. It's just the caffeine boost. That's really awesome. Yeah, I was seeing that you guys had roasted for which I'm not a U.S. men's team fan. I'm by marriage. I'm a Mexico national team fan. So
no one's perfect.
It kind of hurt to watch that happen.
It was just 3 times in a row.
Just 3 times in a row. Not like that means any. No, I'm just kidding. It does. It means a lot. You have a beautiful vinyl collection. I was checking out some of your Instagram photos of you do your vinyl hauls and all that stuff.
Yeah.
How did that start?
It started because I had a bunch of vinyl when I was younger, and I made the horrible mistake of selling all of it in one lump. Like, it went to a friend, which is like I guess the solace I can take from it is at least I know it went to a friend. Mm-hmm. I kind of got to this point where I not only regretted doing that, but I was like, oh, it'd be fun actually to build my collection back up. It's been like, there's actually a lot of pretty cool record stores in Austin, it turns out. So it's been fun kind of working on that, getting back into it.
So are you a person that sources all of that locally, or you try to avoid online, like getting anything through online source?
I try to mostly do it locally. And then like, if there's like something that like is really stuck in my mind and I can't find it somewhere, I'll eventually break down. I had this like thing earlier this year where I was walking down the street and I don't know what it was, but like, it just hit me, like the memory of having the Devoid of Faith Voorhees split LP, mm-hmm. and thinking, wow, what a great record that was. And like, if you look online, there's like, it's not on any streaming service, but it's also like, no one has gotten around to like having like the bootleg, like YouTube video. Like, there's just nothing. Like, if you look online, like there's enough to tell that this record existed, but you can't just like scratch that itch. So I ended up buying that on Discogs, and I'm waiting for that record to come in, and I'm like 50-50, like whether my memory holds up on this record. Like, it'd be equally kind of funny if like I put this on, I was like, you know what was I thinking? This isn't that good. And it turns out it's still pretty great. Particularly the Voorhees side of that record is pretty flawless.
Yeah. I don't even know if I've heard, like, that's so before my time, I think. Cause I'm kind of a young blood, I guess, when it comes to like hardcore, as in I got into it like 8 years ago.
No worries. I'll tell you what, you can find a copy of that record for like probably as much money as you would have paid for it when I bought it the first time. So if you want to find that, there's been literally no markup value on that record.
Wow. That's how you know it's underground. Like, that's just legit underground. I love that. Yeah. There's no hype.
The moment that I could not find more than like a track of like on like a YouTube video, I was like, man, I might be wrong about this record.
It's always those bands too. It's always like the most like nostalgic. Like, it reminds you of like a good memory or something. Like, oh, I remember seeing this band. And they stopped being a band. They have like maybe an EP and an album release, and then you can't find videos anywhere. It's not even on LimeWire. Not that anybody has that anymore, but like, you can't find anything. And so I love bands like that because it's like a special relationship that you have in your mind. I don't know.
The other thing is like everyone's been in like the kind of COVID nostalgia, year of nostalgia. So it's been kind of awesome to just like it, you buy like the one record that you used to have back in the day, and it kind of scratches an itch for you like temporarily, but really what it does is it creates like 10 more itches.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I saw this band with these bands, and then you want to go and buy records from those other bands that
100%.
Like, it creates a web of just money spending and time searching for these records. I love keeping on the topic of music. Your 2021 album of the year. Do you have a release of 2021?
Ooh. I really loved that Lou Barlow record that came out this year, which is decidedly a non-heavy choice. Just Lou Barlow and some lo-fi indie rock.
Yeah. It's okay. The War on Drugs is probably in my top, so I'm in there with you.
It's a great record. I demand that all of your listeners check out that record.
Go now. Turn off this podcast and go listen to the Barlow record.
Stop listening to me. This is just a bunch of nonsense. Go make your lives actually better and go listen to Lou Barlow. I feel like for heavier stuff, biased, but the New Body record is great. That Full of Hell record is pretty good. I love the kind of, it kind of reminds me of like, definitely like the kind of Man is the Bastard worship vibe mixed with something a little more, doesn't necessarily make you feel comfortable, but like in a different sort of way.
Like you're just completely unsettled.
Yeah. I kind of like, I've been listening to like a lot of like noise and improv music lately. And the idea of music not necessarily having to make you feel great has been like both timely and poignant.
That's definitely been
for and of the times.
That's been kind of the case in my household as well. But it does invoke certain emotions that necessarily you wouldn't be too eager to like express, I guess, or feel.
Yeah, it's like an interesting thing about music where I feel like people in other, like in visual art, it sort of seems more acceptable to create things that evoke those types of emotions, whereas it seems to be a lot less acceptable in music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like music is always like, oh, it's entertaining. It makes you feel good. Well, sometimes it's okay to not feel happy and joyful.
Yeah. In fact, it might be healthier to periodically not feel joyful.
Cathartic experiences are what help you grow. Okay. Like let's invoke some cathartic moments.
For sure.
We can't go to hardcore shows, so listen to music that just makes you feel horrible. That's great. I agree. The Full of Hell record. I haven't listened to The Body, the new release from The Body yet, but I do love that noisy them. And is it Uniform is also one of those.
Yep.
Like noisy punk bands.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. But yeah, The Full of Hell is an EP, right? It's not a full on record. I thought it was.
Well, it might be like, it's like one of those things where like length of album may not be like.
It's 5 songs, but it's an hour and a half.
20 minutes and 53 seconds.
How many
5
songs?
tracks.
5? Yeah. I was like, I think it's a shorter one, but it's definitely short. That's like, are you familiar with Zulu? Mm-hmm. Both their albums are about 8 minutes long, and they're both like 6 tracks. It's 8 minutes. I think more time is spent on the samples that they use in between the songs than the actual songs themselves.
I feel like that's a vibe that's coming back from like the late 90s, early aughts.
I love that. Well, Eric, I really appreciate you hanging out with me this evening. Now it's dark here. I don't know if it's dark yet.
Not quite yet. We're getting there.
But I really appreciate you coming on and hanging out. It's always fun to speak with a coffee roaster and somebody who's been in the coffee industry, because I get to nerd out, and I really like that.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I have one last question for you.
Yes.
What is your favorite city for beans and breakdowns?
I have like a bit of a split decision here where I really, really, truly feel grateful for having grown up in the punk scene in Providence, as like a place where a lot of different stuff kind of coexists without any issues. There's a great noise scene. It's a great punk scene, great hardcore scene, and metal, and all of this stuff can kind of just happen simultaneously. And it's pretty special. Wasn't really a lot of truly next level great coffee in Providence prior to like Bolt opening up. But I did love the tail end of kind of living in Providence. The first Bolt location was basically next door to the bar where we would watch Liverpool games. So we had this ritual of going to Bolt and then kind of like walking next door to the bar to watch games. And I kind of dearly miss that. But I'm super excited about the prospect of living here in Austin, where there's like a ton of super great cafes. And I would love to start going to some shows out in Austin and seeing what's up with that.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody from Austin today, and they were saying like Madball, Death Before Dishonor, and I think there's another band on that tour. They're coming through Austin tonight. Austin's such it's known to be that musical city. I don't know if that speaks also to hardcore or metal or anything, but I've heard a lot of bands say how much they love playing Austin. It may just be for the food, but
I mean, I always loved playing in Austin. So I know for sure that there's something going on here.
Yeah, it's in the air. Well, Eric, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really hope that everything with Medici, y'all keep growing and you know, cultivating that good culture and you know, the tasting and roasting profiles. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge thanks to Eric for coming on the podcast and sharing about his experience in the coffee industry, his experience with Medici, and I wish him all the best in pushing forward with that program down there. Be sure to check Medici out if you're in the Austin area. They have a number of shops, as well as you can visit them online. They have some merch, some brew equipment, as well as some coffee that you're able to order online. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. You can also find out more about Beans and Breakdowns by following us on Instagram at Beans and Breakdowns, and check us out on the web at beansandbreakdowns.com. Until next week, stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up.